The war room of the Zephyrian High Command was filled with panic. Admiral Kethvar looked at the big screens showing the terrible truth. The enemy called the Void Swarm had destroyed 17 star systems in just 3 months. His long tentacles moved with worry as bad news came from all over the galaxy. The greatest military alliance in known space was losing badly. The Zephyrians had the best technology. The Ethereal Collective had powerful mind abilities. The Hive Confederacy had millions of ships. Together they should have been able to stop any enemy, but they were failing. "Report from the Centauri sector," called out a young officer. His voice shook with fear. "The swarm has taken 3 more planets. Our fleets could not stop them." Admiral Kethvar hit the table with his fist. "How is this possible? We threw everything at them. Our best ships, our strongest weapons, our smartest battle plans. Nothing works." The Void Swarm was unlike any enemy they had ever faced. The alien ships seemed to come from outside their galaxy. They looked like living creatures made of dark metal and strange flesh. When the Alliance fired energy weapons at them, something terrible happened. Instead of being destroyed, the swarm ships got stronger. They fed on the energy like hungry animals. Worse, when one ship was hit enough times, it would split into 2 ships. The more the galaxy fought, the stronger the enemy became. It was a nightmare that seemed impossible to stop. "Sir," said another officer, "the science teams have a new report about the swarm ships." "Tell me," the admiral said, his voice tired. "They think the ships are alive. They eat energy and use it to grow and make copies of themselves. Every time we shoot them with plasma cannons or photon torpedoes, we are actually feeding them." The room went quiet. Everyone understood what this meant. All their weapons made the enemy stronger. How do you fight an enemy that gets power from being attacked? General Thoxera of the Hive Confederacy spoke up. His insect-like face showed anger. "Then what do we do? Stop fighting? Let them take over the galaxy? We need new ideas," said Admiral Kethvar. "Something the swarm has never seen before." "What about the old weapons?" asked a young ethereal. "Before we had energy weapons, our ancestors used different tools for war." The older officers looked at her like she was crazy. "You mean kinetic weapons? Physical projectiles? Those are ancient and weak. We stopped using them thousands of years ago for good reasons." "But maybe," the young ethereal started to say. "No," said General Thoxera firmly. "Those old weapons are useless against modern armor. We need more power, not less." As the leaders argued, a communications officer at the back of the room raised his hand. "Sir, I have something strange to report." Admiral Kethvar looked at him. "What is it?" "A single unknown ship has entered the Kepler 442 system. That's where our biggest swarm fleet is gathering for their attack on the core worlds." The room went silent. Everyone knew about Kepler 442. It was where the swarm was building up for their final attack. The biggest collection of enemy ships ever seen was there, ready to destroy the most important planets in the galaxy. "What kind of ship?" asked the admiral. The officer looked confused. "We don't know, sir. The energy signature doesn't match anything in our databases. It's completely unknown. Could it be another swarm ship? A new type? No, sir. The energy pattern is totally different." "And, sir?" "They responded to our hail. This got everyone's attention. The swarm never talked. They just attacked and consumed." "What did they say?" The officer looked at his screen. "They used old Galactic Standard language, very old. The translation systems had trouble with it. They said their ship name is the Indomitable." Admiral Kethvar's tentacles stopped moving. He knew that word. It was from the ancient databases. "Did they say what species they are?" "Yes, sir. They said they are human." The room exploded with surprised voices. Some officers laughed. Others looked shocked. A few looked scared. "Human?" said General Thoxera. "That's impossible. The humans were quarantined 200 years ago. The Galactic Council declared them too dangerous for space travel." Admiral Kethvar remembered the old files. Humans had been discovered when the galaxy was much younger. They were a strange species from a planet called Earth. Unlike other intelligent races, humans seem to have evolved in constant conflict. They were aggressive, unpredictable, and had dangerous ideas about warfare. The worst part was their technology. While other species focused on clean, efficient energy weapons, humans used crude kinetic weapons. They threw metal at high speeds to hurt their enemies. The Galactic Council thought it was primitive and violent. But humans also had other problems. They couldn't work together like other species. They fought among themselves constantly. They took huge risks that other species thought were stupid. They refused to follow galactic laws and customs. Finally, the Council had decided that humans were too unstable for galactic society. A quarantine barrier was put around their solar system. No human ship was allowed to leave. No galactic ship was allowed to enter. The humans were left alone to think about their behavior. That was 200 years ago. Most people had forgotten about them. "Are we sure it's really a human ship?" asked Admiral Kethvar. "The communication patterns match the old human databases," said the officer. "And sir, they're asking for permission to engage the swarm fleet." The leaders looked at each other. One old human ship against the biggest swarm fleet ever assembled? It sounded like suicide. "How big is this human ship?" asked General Thoxera. "Approximately 800 meters long. Single vessel. No escort ships." The insect general made a sound like laughter. One small ship against 10,000 swarm vessels? These humans are still as crazy as ever. But Admiral Kethvar was thinking. The humans had been alone for 200 years. What had they been doing all that time? Had they learned new things? Had they changed? "Sir," said the communications officer, "the human ship is asking for our battle data on the swarm. They want to know how our weapons affect the enemy." "Should we tell them?" asked an aide. Admiral Kethvar thought about it. What could one ship do that the entire Galactic Alliance could not? But maybe, just maybe, the humans had learned something new during their long isolation. "Send them everything," he decided. "All our tactical data, weapon effectiveness reports, and battle recordings." "Sir?" General Thoxera looked surprised. "Are you sure? What do we have to lose? If they want to throw their lives away against the swarm, at least we can give them the information to understand what they're facing." The data was sent. For several minutes, there was silence from the human ship. Then a new message came. "Thank you for the data. We understand the situation now. Request permission to engage the enemy." Admiral Kethvar made his decision. Permission granted. Good luck, humans. He did not expect to hear from them again. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the screens that showed the massive enemy fleet ahead. She was a tall woman with short black hair and calm brown eyes. Her uniform was simple and practical, unlike the fancy clothes worn by galactic officers. Around her, the bridge was busy but quiet. Her crew of 300 humans worked at their stations with focused determination. They all knew this might be their last day alive, but they also knew they were here to save the galaxy. The same galaxy that had rejected them 2 centuries ago. Elena remembered the day Earth received the first distress signals from galactic space. The messages spoke of a terrible enemy that was destroying everything. The Void Swarm was consuming star systems one by one. The Great Galactic Alliance was begging for help from anyone who could provide it. The irony was not lost on her. 200 years ago, the Galactic Council had told humanity they were too dangerous for space. They said humans were violent, unpredictable, and unsuitable for civilized society. Earth had been locked away behind an energy barrier, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. "You are too aggressive," the Council had said. "You solve problems with violence. You take risks that endanger everyone. You cannot be trusted in galactic society." So humanity had been left alone. No trade, no communication, no contact with the outside universe. Most species forgot humans even existed. But humans had not been idle during those 200 years. While the galaxy enjoyed peace and advanced their elegant energy-based technologies, Earth had prepared for war. Because humans knew something the galaxy had forgotten, peace only lasts as long as everyone agrees to keep it. Elena had studied the galactic data they had just received. The swarm ships were indeed living creatures that fed on energy. Every time the galaxy shot them with plasma weapons or photon torpedoes, the ships got stronger and multiplied. It was a perfect defense against the galaxy's advanced technology, but there was something the galaxy did not understand about humans. When faced with an impossible problem, humans did not give up. They adapted. They found new ways. They used old ways. They tried things that other species thought were crazy or stupid. "Commander," said Lieutenant Chen from the weapons station, "I've finished analyzing the galactic battle data. The swarm ships show no resistance to kinetic weapons because the galaxy hasn't used kinetic weapons in thousands of years." Elena smiled. This was exactly what she had hoped to hear. "What's our weapons status?" "All systems green, ma'am. Railguns are charged and ready. Mass drivers are loaded. Kinetic penetrators are armed. We have enough ammunition for a sustained engagement." The Indomitable was not like the elegant ships of the Galactic Alliance, where their ships were smooth and beautiful. The human ship was practical and deadly. It bristled with weapons that the galaxy considered primitive: railguns, mass drivers, and kinetic cannons. While the galaxy had moved on to clean energy weapons, humans had perfected the art of throwing things very, very fast. The ship's main railguns could accelerate tungsten rods to a significant percentage of light speed. The mass drivers could hurl chunks of metal the size of small buildings. The kinetic penetrators could punch through almost any armor. "Navigation!" Elena called out. "What's our position relative to the swarm fleet?" "We're at the edge of the system, Commander. The swarm fleet is gathered around the fourth planet. Sensors count approximately 10,000 ships of various sizes." 10,000 ships. Elena shook her head. The galaxy's greatest fleets had been destroyed by much smaller swarm forces. What made the galactic leaders think that one human ship could succeed where their mighty alliance had failed? But Elena knew something they did not. She knew that sometimes the best way to solve a new problem was to use an old solution. Sometimes the most advanced answer was to go back to basics. "Commander," said Dr. Sarah Kim from the science station, "I've been studying the swarm biology from the galactic data. These creatures evolved to absorb and process energy. Their whole body structure is designed for it, but there's no indication they can handle physical trauma." "Explain," Elena said. "Think of them like plants that eat sunlight," Dr. Kim said. "They're perfectly designed to take in energy and use it to grow. But if you hit a plant with a rock, it doesn't matter how good it is at eating sunlight. The rock will still damage it." This confirmed what Elena had suspected. The swarm had evolved the perfect defense against the galaxy's energy weapons. But evolution always specialized. If you became very good at one thing, you often became weak against something else. "Communications," Elena called out. "Any word from Earth?" "Last message was 12 hours ago, Commander. Admiral Hayes confirms that Earth supports this mission. The President sends her regards and says to show them what humans can do." Elena nodded. Earth's government had debated this mission for weeks. Some people thought they should stay isolated and let the galaxy solve its own problems. After all, the galaxy had rejected humanity. Why should humans risk their lives to save people who did not want them? But in the end, humanity had chosen to help. Not because the galaxy deserved it, but because it was the right thing to do. Billions of innocent people were going to die if the swarm was not stopped. Human or alien, life was precious. Elena looked around at her crew. These were volunteers, every one of them. When Earth had called for people to crew the Indomitable on this dangerous mission, thousands had applied. They all knew it was probably a one-way trip. They came anyway. "Listen up, everyone," Elena said, her voice carrying to every station on the bridge. "In a few minutes, we're going to face an enemy that has destroyed the greatest fleets in galactic history. We're outnumbered 10,000 to 1. The smart money says we're all going to die." She paused, looking at each of her officers in turn. "But we're not here because it's smart. We're here because no one else can do what needs to be done." The galaxy forgot how to fight dirty. They forgot that sometimes you need to use a rock instead of a laser. They forgot that the simplest solutions are often the best ones. The crew listened intently. Elena could see the determination in their faces. "Today we remind the galaxy why humans don't stay down. We show them that being called too dangerous isn't always an insult. Sometimes dangerous is exactly what the universe needs." She turned to the main screen where the swarm fleet was clearly visible. Thousands of dark, organic-looking ships moved in complex patterns around the planet. They were preparing for their final assault on the galactic core worlds. "Helm, take us in. Full speed. Let's go save the galaxy." The Indomitable began its approach to the enemy fleet. Behind them, the galaxy watched and waited. Ahead of them, the swarm prepared for another easy victory against energy weapons they could absorb and convert. Neither side knew that everything was about to change. The galaxy was about to remember why they had been afraid of humans in the first place, and the swarm was about to learn that evolution had not prepared them for everything. Elena smiled as the distance to the enemy fleet decreased. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways. Today the universe would remember the power of throwing rocks very, very fast. The Void Swarm had conquered half the galaxy using a simple but deadly strategy. Their ships were not machines like the vessels built by other species. They were living creatures grown rather than constructed. Each ship was a biological entity with dark organic hulls that pulsed with a strange inner light. These creatures had evolved in the space between galaxies, where energy was scarce and precious. Over millions of years, they had developed the ability to absorb and feed on any form of energy they encountered. When the Galactic Alliance fired their advanced energy weapons at the swarm, something terrible happened. The plasma beams that should have destroyed the alien ships were instead absorbed into their hulls. The creatures fed on the energy, growing larger and stronger with each attack. Even worse, when a swarm ship absorbed enough energy, it would undergo a process similar to cell division. One ship would become two ships, identical and equally hungry. Commander Elena Vasquez studied the tactical data on her screen as the Indomitable approached the massive enemy fleet. The information from the Galactic Alliance painted a clear picture of disaster after disaster. Every battle followed the same pattern. The Alliance would attack with their best weapons, the swarm would feed and multiply, and what started as a manageable enemy force would become an unstoppable horde. "It's perfect," said Dr. Sarah Kim from her science station. "They've evolved the ultimate defense against energy-based warfare. No wonder the galaxy can't stop them." Elena nodded. The Galactic Alliance had spent thousands of years perfecting energy weapons. Plasma cannons, photon torpedoes, fusion beams, and antimatter charges were the peak of their military technology. These weapons were clean, efficient, and incredibly powerful against traditional armor and shields. But the swarm didn't use traditional defenses. Their biological hulls were designed to capture and process energy. Fighting them with energy weapons was like trying to kill a plant by shining more sunlight on it. "Commander," called Lieutenant Chen from the weapons station, "I've been analyzing the swarm ship movements. They're not random. There's a pattern." Elena looked at the tactical display. The 10,000 swarm ships were indeed moving in a complex but organized fashion around the fourth planet of the Kepler 442 system. "What kind of pattern?" "They're feeding," Chen explained. "The planet has high levels of geothermal energy. The swarm ships are absorbing it in shifts. Some ships feed while others guard. Then they rotate positions." This explained why the swarm had chosen this system for their staging area. They were not just preparing for attack. They were building up their energy reserves. When they finally moved on the galactic core worlds, they would be at full strength. "How long until they're ready to move out?" Elena asked. "Based on their current absorption rate, maybe 6 hours," Chen replied. "After that, they'll have enough energy to make the jump to the core systems." Elena knew what that meant. If the swarm reached the core worlds at full strength, the galaxy's most important planets would fall within days. Billions of people would die. The great galactic civilization would come to an end. "Commander," said the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian fleet. Admiral Kethvar wants to know our battle plan." Elena almost laughed. Battle plan? She was about to attack 10,000 enemy ships with one human vessel. By any reasonable measure, it was suicide. But humans had never been known for being reasonable. "Tell the Admiral we'll engage the enemy in 30 minutes. Advise all galactic ships to maintain safe distance." "Ma'am?" The communications officer looked worried. "The Admiral is asking about coordination with their forces. He wants to know how we plan to work together." "Tell him we work better alone," Elena replied. "Human tactics might be confusing to Allied forces." This was partly true, but Elena had another reason for keeping the galactic ships away. What she was about to do would challenge everything the galaxy believed about modern warfare. It was better if they observed from a distance. Elena studied the enemy formation on her screen. The swarm ships were beautiful in their own alien way. Their hulls curved and flowed like living tissue, which they essentially were. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed along their surfaces as they absorbed energy from the planet below. The largest ships were nearly 2 kilometers long, massive creatures that could probably absorb the full firepower of a galactic dreadnought and ask for more. The smallest were about the size of fighters, but Elena knew that even these could take multiple direct hits from energy weapons and survive. But there was something the swarm had never encountered. Something the galaxy had forgotten about in their rush toward advanced technology. The simple, brutal effectiveness of kinetic energy. "Weapon status report," Elena called out. "All systems green," replied Lieutenant Chen. "Main railguns charged to full power. Secondary railguns ready. Mass drivers loaded with tungsten steel penetrators. Kinetic missile tubes armed with depleted uranium warheads." The Indomitable carried no energy weapons at all. Every weapon system was designed around the principle of accelerating solid matter to extremely high velocities. The main railguns could fire tungsten rods at 20% of light speed. The mass drivers could hurl multi-ton projectiles with devastating accuracy. Even the missiles carried kinetic warheads instead of explosive ones. "Science station," Elena said. "Remind me why kinetic weapons work when energy weapons don't." Dr. Kim looked up from her console. "The swarm creatures have evolved specialized organs for energy absorption and processing. But they're still made of organic matter. When you hit organic matter with a high-velocity projectile, the laws of physics apply regardless of evolution." She brought up a diagram on the main screen. "Think of it this way. A plant can absorb sunlight and convert it to energy. But if you shoot the plant with a bullet, the bullet doesn't care about photosynthesis. Kinetic energy is transferred directly to the target's matter, causing physical damage that can't be absorbed or converted." Elena smiled. It was elegant in its simplicity. The galaxy had become so advanced that they had forgotten the basics. Sometimes the most sophisticated problem required the most basic solution. "Navigation," she called out. "Plot an attack course. I want to hit the largest concentration of ships first." "Course plotted, Commander. We can approach from their blind spot behind the planet's rings." "Excellent. Communications, send a message to Earth. Tell them we're beginning the engagement." "Message sent, ma'am." Elena took a deep breath. In a few minutes she would either save the galaxy or die trying, but she felt strangely calm. This was what humans were good at, finding a way when everyone else said there was no way. "All hands, this is the commander," she announced over the ship's communication system. "In 5 minutes we will engage the enemy. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. Today we show the galaxy that being human means never giving up." She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew. These were good people, brave people. They deserved to know the truth. "I won't lie to you. The odds are terrible. We're outnumbered and outgunned by any reasonable measure. But we have something the enemy doesn't expect. The willingness to try something they've never seen before." Elena turned to the main screen, where the swarm fleet waited in ignorant confidence. "Let's go teach the universe why humans don't stay down." The Indomitable began its final approach to the enemy fleet, carrying humanity's hopes and the galaxy's last chance into battle. The battle began the moment the Indomitable dropped out of its approach vector and came into clear sight of the swarm fleet. Commander Elena Vasquez watched her tactical display as thousands of alien ships suddenly changed their formation. The peaceful feeding pattern around the planet instantly transformed into an aggressive attack formation. "Swarm ships are moving to intercept," announced Lieutenant Chen from the weapons station. "Estimated time to contact 45 seconds. Elena felt her heartbeat quicken, but her voice remained calm. "All batteries prepare to fire. Target the largest concentration of ships. Full spread pattern." The swarm ships moved with fluid grace through space, their organic hulls rippling as they accelerated toward the lone human vessel. They had destroyed hundreds of galactic ships using the same tactics. Absorb the enemy's energy weapons, multiply, and overwhelm through superior numbers. From their perspective, this was just another easy victory. One small ship against 10,000 proven fighters. The swarm creatures prepared to feed. 30 seconds to optimal firing range, Chen reported. All weapons systems show green. Railguns charged to maximum power. Elena watched the enemy ships approach in their flowing formation. Beautiful, deadly, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. "On my mark, Lieutenant." "Fire for effect." The distance closed rapidly. The swarm ships spread out to surround the Indomitable, expecting the human vessel to begin firing energy weapons at any moment. They were ready to absorb whatever the humans could throw at them. 20 seconds, Chen called out. Elena could see individual details on the nearest swarm ships now. Their hulls pulsed with absorbed energy from the planet below. Bioluminescent patterns flowed along their surfaces like alien veins. They were magnificent predators, perfectly evolved for their prey. Too bad they had never met humans before. 10 seconds to optimal range. 5 seconds. Range optimal. All targets locked. Elena smiled grimly and spoke the words that would change galactic history. All batteries fire for effect. Full spread. The Indomitable unleashed hell. 12 main railguns fired simultaneously, sending tungsten rods screaming through space at 20% of light speed. 24 secondary railguns followed immediately after, creating a deadly hail of smaller projectiles. 8 mass drivers hurled tungsten steel penetrators the size of shuttlecraft into the enemy formation. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The first tungsten rod hit a large swarm ship dead center. The creature that had evolved to absorb energy had no defense against simple kinetic impact. The rod punched through the organic hull like it was paper, creating a massive cavitation wound as it transferred its tremendous momentum to the ship's body. The swarm ship died instantly. More impacts followed in rapid succession. Tungsten rods and steel penetrators tore through the alien formation, each hit creating destruction that could not be absorbed or healed. The creatures that had fed on the galaxy's energy weapons were completely helpless against humanity's simple, brutal approach to warfare. Direct hits on primary targets, Chen reported with professional calm. But Elena could hear the excitement in his voice. Enemy ships are showing massive structural damage. No energy absorption detected. Through the main screen, Elena watched the swarm's perfect formation dissolve into chaos. Ships that had moved with fluid grace moments before now tumbled through space, their bodies ruptured by kinetic impacts they could not process or heal. Second wave, fire at will, Elena ordered. The Indomitable's weapon system cycled and fired again. More tungsten rods crossed the distance in seconds, finding their targets with mechanical precision. The railguns had been designed for this kind of engagement. Rapid, accurate fire against multiple targets. Each hit was a lesson in basic physics. When a high-velocity projectile strikes an object, energy is transferred regardless of the object's ability to absorb other forms of energy. The swarm ships were learning this lesson the hard way. Enemy formation is breaking apart, reported the navigation officer. Survivors are attempting to scatter. Elena nodded. The surviving swarm ships were trying to adapt, some growing thicker armor, others attempting to dodge the incoming projectiles. But evolution had not prepared them for this type of warfare. Target the largest remaining groups, Elena commanded. Don't let them regroup. The mass drivers fired again, hurling multi-ton projectiles into clusters of enemy ships. These weapons were slower than the railguns but carried enormous kinetic energy. When they hit, entire groups of swarm ships were destroyed by the impacts. "Commander," called Dr. Kim from the science station, "I'm reading something interesting. The swarm ships are trying to adapt to our weapons, but they can't. Their biology is specifically designed for energy absorption. They literally have no mechanism for dealing with kinetic trauma." This confirmed what Elena had hoped. The swarm's perfect evolution had made them helpless against an attack they had never encountered. They were like deep-sea creatures suddenly exposed to sunlight, or desert animals thrown into an Arctic environment. 15 seconds since engagement began, Chen announced. Estimated enemy casualties: 3,000 ships destroyed, 2,000 severely damaged. Half the enemy fleet was already gone. Elena felt a surge of fierce satisfaction. The galaxy's most feared enemy was being defeated by weapons the Galactic Alliance considered primitive and outdated. "Continue firing," she ordered. "Full spread pattern. Target any ship still showing movement." The railguns fired again and again, their tungsten projectiles crossing space at relativistic speeds. The swarm ships that tried to flee found that you cannot outrun mathematics. The kinetic penetrators calculated their trajectories with computer precision, leading their targets and striking with devastating accuracy. 20 seconds, Chen called out. Enemy casualties now estimated at 7,000 ships. Remaining forces are in full retreat. But there was nowhere for them to run. The Indomitable's weapons had longer range than the swarm ships could travel in the time it took for projectiles to reach them. Elena watched as the last organized groups of enemy ships were systematically destroyed. 25 seconds, Chen announced. 9,000 enemy ships destroyed or disabled. Minimal organized resistance remaining. Elena looked at the tactical display, where moments before there had been a massive enemy fleet, preparing to destroy the galactic core worlds. Now there was only debris and a few scattered survivors attempting to flee. 30 seconds since engagement began, Chen reported. Tactical assessment. Enemy fleet is effectively neutralized. Mission accomplished. The bridge of the Indomitable went quiet except for the hum of machinery. Elena stared at the screen showing the aftermath of the battle. 30 seconds. That was all it had taken to destroy the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Communications, Elena said finally. Send a message to the galactic fleet. Tell them the Kepler 442 system is secure. She paused, thinking about what this meant. Humanity had just saved the galaxy using weapons the Galactic Alliance had abandoned thousands of years ago. Sometimes the oldest solutions really were the best solutions. Also send a message to Earth, she added. Tell them the mission is successful. We're coming home. Elena looked around at her crew. They had done the impossible and they all knew it. But more importantly, they had proven something about humanity that the galaxy had forgotten. When the universe needed someone crazy enough to bring kinetic weapons to an energy fight, sometimes it needed humans. The silence in the Zephyrian war room was so complete that Admiral Kethvar could hear his own hearts beating. He stared at the tactical display showing the Kepler 442 system, trying to process what he had just witnessed. Where the largest Void Swarm fleet in galactic history had been gathering for their final assault, now only debris remained. Report, he said quietly, his voice barely audible. The young communications officer checked his instruments twice before answering. The swarm fleet has been completely destroyed, sir. Total engagement time was 37 seconds. The human ship appears undamaged. How many human vessels participated in the attack? Asked General Thoxera, his insect-like face showing confusion. One, sir. Just the single ship called Indomitable. The room remained silent. Every military leader present had spent their careers studying warfare. They understood tactics, strategy, and the mathematics of combat. What they had just seen should have been impossible. Admiral Kethvar's tentacles moved nervously as he tried to comprehend the implications. What weapons did they use? The sensor readings are unusual, sir. No energy signatures that match our weapon databases. The projectiles appear to be solid matter accelerated to extremely high velocities. Kinetic weapons? General Thoxera sounded shocked. They used kinetic weapons? Yes, sir. Projectile weapons firing physical matter at the enemy ships. The galactic leaders looked at each other with growing understanding. They had all studied ancient history. Before the development of energy weapons, their ancestors had used kinetic projectiles for warfare. But those primitive weapons had been abandoned thousands of years ago when better technology became available. Or so they had thought. Sir, the communications officer announced, we're receiving a transmission from the human ship. Admiral Kethvar straightened his uniform. Put it through. Commander Elena Vasquez appeared on the main screen, standing calmly on her bridge. Behind her, human crew members worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. She looked directly at the camera and spoke in clear, simple galactic standard. This is Commander Vasquez of the human vessel Indomitable. The Kepler 442 system is secure. The Void Swarm threat has been neutralized. She paused, and Admiral Kethvar could see something in her eyes that made him uncomfortable. It was not anger or hatred. It was the calm confidence of someone who had just proved a very important point. The Sol quarantine is hereby terminated, Elena continued. Humanity is returning to the galaxy. We will be sending our diplomatic corps to discuss new terms of engagement. We suggest you be ready to negotiate as equals this time. The transmission ended, leaving the war room in stunned silence. Equals. General Thoxera's voice was filled with indignation. They were quarantined for good reasons. They are violent, unpredictable, and dangerous. Admiral Kethvar looked at the tactical display again. The debris field that had once been 10,000 swarm ships told a different story. They just saved the galaxy in 37 seconds using weapons we discarded as primitive. Perhaps we need to reconsider our definition of dangerous. But they violated the quarantine, protested another officer. They left their system without permission. To save billions of lives, Admiral Kethvar replied, including our own. He thought about the reports he would have to send to the Galactic Council. How do you explain that a single ship from a quarantined species had solved the greatest crisis in galactic history? How do you justify keeping that species isolated when they had just proved their value? Sir, said the communications officer, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Other swarm fleets are retreating. Some are fleeing toward the galactic edge. It appears the destruction of the main fleet has caused a general collapse of swarm operations. This made sense to Admiral Kethvar. The Kepler 442 fleet had been the swarm's main force, gathering strength for the final assault. With it destroyed, the remaining scattered fleets were too weak to continue their conquest. The humans had not just won a battle. They had ended the war. What are your orders, sir? Asked an aide. Admiral Kethvar considered his options. He could try to maintain the quarantine, but that would be pointless now. The humans had demonstrated they could leave their system whenever they wanted. More importantly, they had shown that they were not the primitive, violent species the galaxy had assumed them to be. Well, they were violent. but they had directed that violence at the galaxy's enemies instead of at the galaxy itself. Send a message to the Galactic Council, he decided. Inform them that the Void Swarm crisis has been resolved through the intervention of human forces. Recommend immediate review of the Sol quarantine status. Sir, General Thoxara objected, the humans are still dangerous. We saw what their weapons can do. Yes, Admiral Kethavar agreed. We saw what their weapons can do to our enemies. Would you rather have humans as allies or have them decide we are enemies? This silenced the general's objections. Everyone had seen how quickly the human weapons had destroyed the swarm fleet. None of them wanted to imagine those same weapons pointed at galactic ships. There's something else to consider, said a young ethereal officer. The humans were alone for 200 years. If they developed these weapons during that time, what else did they develop? What other technologies do they have that we don't know about? Admiral Kethavar had been wondering the same thing. The humans had always been innovative, often in ways that made other species uncomfortable. 2 centuries of isolation might have led to discoveries that would reshape galactic civilization. Sir, announced the communications officer, the human ship is leaving the system. They're heading back towards Sol. On the screen, they could see the Indomitable turning away from the debris field and beginning its journey home. The ship looked small and simple compared to the elegant vessels of the galactic fleet, but appearances were clearly deceptive. Track their course, Admiral Kethavar ordered, and prepare a diplomatic mission. We need to establish formal contact before they reach Earth. What should we tell them? Asked an aide. Admiral Kethavar thought about this carefully. What do you say to a species you had dismissed and quarantined, who had then returned to save your civilization from extinction? We tell them the truth, he decided. We made a mistake. We judged them by our standards instead of trying to understand their strengths. We owe them an apology and our gratitude. The Council may not approve of that approach, warned General Thoxara. Then the Council will have to explain to the galaxy why we want to antagonize the people who just saved us all, Admiral Kethavar replied firmly. Meanwhile, aboard the Indomitable, Commander Elena Vasquez stood in her ready room looking at a star chart showing the route back to Earth. In a few days, she would be home with the news that would change everything for humanity. The galaxy had learned that humans were not too dangerous for civilization. They were exactly dangerous enough to protect it. Her communications officer knocked on the door. Commander, we're receiving multiple messages from galactic governments. They all want to establish diplomatic contact. Elena smiled. 200 years ago, the galaxy had wanted nothing to do with humanity. Now they were eager to talk. It was amazing how quickly attitudes could change when you save someone's life. Tell them we'll be happy to discuss diplomatic relations, she said. But they'll need to come to Earth. We have some things to show them. As the Indomitable continued its journey home, Elena reflected on the irony of the situation. The galaxy had quarantined humanity because they were afraid of human unpredictability and violence. But when faced with an enemy that their advanced civilization could not defeat, they had needed exactly those human traits to survive. Sometimes being called dangerous was not an insult. Sometimes it was exactly what the universe needed. The human race was going home as heroes, and the galaxy would never be the same.